Israel had an undeniable role in Epstein's crimes. We know that, and Tucker Carlson is saying that here, explaining why he believes that, who else was involved, and why there's so much more to this story under the surface that hasn't been covered. So let's watch. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
There's a lot of these people walking around, and I just know a handful of them. And then you look at the politics, and look at this shit, the Epstein files. It's a hoax. It's a hoax. It's a national security threat. They're fake. This is like, what the fuck, man? The American people are fucking screaming at you, screaming that they want this shit released. Yeah. Congress, I don't even know the number. What is it like? I can't remember. How many people are in Congress?
535 Senate plus House. 435 in the House.
Everybody except one person.
Yep.
I don't know. Who is the one person?
Some guy.
Yeah. But And so, like, back to earlier, like, we want to make an impact. We want to tell the truth. We want to, do these. And we had a big influence in the last election. Seemed like a great thing.
Didn't matter.
At the time, it felt great. Was that a good thing?
You can't.
Now we got a guy who's, America first, all this other fucking bullshit. And everybody is screaming, release these fucking files. We want to know what is going on. We want to know.
What would we find out if they were all released? Anything we didn't know?
Honestly, I have no idea. Is it the end of the fucking country? Like, is it really that bad?
C.S. Lewis has this, I have tons of opinions on the subject. I don't have, concrete proof. Of course, I think I know, but C.S. Lewis has this, I think it was C.S. Lewis, has this essay in which he says, people debate, was Jesus really God or whatever. If Jesus came back to earth tomorrow and held a press conference, like a week later, people would be talking about something else. It's like, we actually know what's true. We know what's true. And the way that dogs know what's true, you can't reason with the dog. The dog can smell it. And he sticks with his opinion because he has no other input.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that, but of course we need to know the details because we need to know the names connected to this thing. This thing that was probably an Israeli blackmail operation manifesting as this child sex trafficking ring that prominent people were involved in. So no matter how harmful that is to certain subsections of the political class, tribe A, tribe B, I think it's more likely to be harmful to both tribes, and really they seem like a singular uniparty tribe most of the time. Americans want answers. It's not to say that people wouldn't try to bury that or forget about it. It probably would, but it would also decipher the corruption at the core of the government, which is really important to us dissidents who want that corruption to be put forward, for there to be transparency so that people on the outside, maybe political laymen, maybe people that don't have a particular disposition toward politics, can see things as we do and know things as we know. That would be an important way to do it. The guy who voted against the Epstein files release was Clay Higgins from Louisiana. I can't wait to be seeing what his constituents in his district in Louisiana say about that. I wouldn't want to be him defending covering up a child sex trafficking ring and Epstein's crimes and the documents, especially when the victims are standing for release. And even Trump relented in the end.
If you hate a dog, you can't talk your way out of it. The dog knows you hate the dog because dogs have unerring instincts, and so do we. And so, of course, we know exactly what the Epstein story is about. It's about the deep corruption of global leadership, of course. And you can say it's about Israel, it's about the CIA. Well, is there a distinction, really?
No. There doesn't seem to be a distinction between the CIA and Israel, or in particular Mossad these days, that's for sure.
Not just between Israel and Mossad and CIA, but about the British government, or really kind of any government, or any, Bill Gates or Leon Black. It's all kind of varieties of the same thing. It's corrupt leadership that is acting on its own behalf against the interests of the people they lead. It's the oldest story there is. It's the Pharisees. And if we're honest, we already know that. So, I'm completely for disclosure of everything, but I don't lie to myself and say that disclosure would change human nature, because it won't. And people have an opportunity to exploit others, generally will. And the rest of us need to fight daily against that, not because we're going to win in the short term, but because it is our duty and to serve what's good and true.
Yeah, I mean, I'll disagree with them to some extent. I think a true release, and by the way, I mean by that a true release, not unlimited redactions and classified documents that never see the light of day, which will happen, by the way. A real release, I do think, would change the way multitudes of Americans would see the government, would see who has been involved in these crimes, where the money trails came from, you know, which person on each side of this was involved, how deep this goes into the underbelly of the bureaucracy, the legal community, of the business community. I think Americans, many of them, would change their perceptions to government in the same way that many Americans' perceptions toward government changed in light of the COVID regime. They'll never be the same again after withstanding that gaslight campaign, after they withstood the CIA involvement in the JFK assassination. Probable CIA involvement in that changed people's mindsets. It's not going to change the entire populace, but I do think that would change a lot of people's mindsets, and that's why there has been this cover-up. It's really the only thing to explain the cover-up.
Period, even if we're killed doing it. So, I don't know. I mean, I won't stop pushing for disclosure. I really believe that. Trust is built on honesty. It's not built on lies, ever.
You know, you say, you know, does it change? I can't remember your exact verbiage, but we were talking about, you know, when this gets exposed, does it change anything? No, this is the nature of man. This is what happens. But
we already know the answer.
Men need to be reset, and men have not been fucking reset, not in this country, for a long time.
That's coming, whether we want it or not. We don't want it, but it's coming.
And
all this shit about women don't need men. You've obviously seen chaos in a society, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like actual chaos. People just like shoot into buildings and no one arrests them. Mm-hmm. You spent your life around that stuff. Those societies don't ask questions like, what are men for? You know what I mean? Right. And we're, of course, moving closer to that. And
Yeah, I mean, that does seem to be a novelty push. I don't focus on much of those issues on this channel, but that is a way to divide people against each other. And it seems to be coming from a regime that wants us squabbling with our neighbors on those cultural lines that they don't really care about. They would care if we joined together against them on the financial corruption and on the wars and on the Epstein stuff, joining with people we otherwise might disagree with on immigration and, you know, guns and abortion and the culture war and stuff like that. But definitely they have a concern when it comes to what we would align on that would disrupt their stranglehold on power over us.
All of this, all of our silliest manifestations, you know, the trans craziness or feminism or other just revolts against nature are only possible because we live in this nerf world of affluence. But as that starts to change, and it is changing, then the upside of that, we're going to get poorer and the society will become more dangerous, but we'll also be a little more rooted in reality. In the same way that rich people are insufferable, not all, but a lot of rich people are insufferable because they're detached from reality, from nature, from God, from like the things that are real, and they convince themselves because they can fly from point to point without going through TSA that they have infinite power, and they don't, and that's why they're so hard to have dinner with. But a normal society doesn't have these problems. It has all kinds of other problems, but doesn't have the American problems of like, you know, I'm a 40-year-old unmarried Citibank executive. I'll just get a surrogate. It's like, okay. For the suicide rate, there's not a lot of suicide in, you know, impoverished countries because like the mission is really clear. Eat.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some truth to this. I also think this is essentially a government program that's not totally organic. We saw this pushed from the early 2010s to the mid 2010s when you saw the culture war come in and disrupt the Venn diagram of kind of alignment. There was some between the Tea Party movement and Occupy talking about the financial corruption in government, especially in regard to the TARP bailouts. That was a little bit before the early 2010s. But this is when you saw a mass injection of trans issues, war on women, you know, racism, sexism, homophobia. And if you don't believe me, this isn't just anecdotal. You can go on LexisNexis and do searches. Those words come up in a firestorm of explosivity in those years. It was injected into the consciousness of Americans so that Americans would fight over those issues, rather than fighting them on the empire building schemes and the corporate welfare schemes and the deep state corruption. I think that is responsible.
You know, there's not a lot of crisis of meaning in Burundi. You know what I mean?
It's a fight for the day.
Yeah, it's a fight for the day. Well, it's a trade-off. I mean, I would much rather live in a DoorDash society because I like comfort and ease and everything, but it is a trade-off, and you trade comfort for meaning. That's just kind of what we've done, and we shouldn't be surprised by it.
What do you think happens, honestly? If this, do you think this is actually is this gonna come out? Or has it all been shredded? I mean, Mark Epstein said this is...
of course. I mean, we don't have the JFK files.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you ask, like, why don't we? Who is being protected here? There are no living stakeholders in that story. There's no living participant in that murder conspiracy. It was a conspiracy. We know that. So who were the participants in that conspiracy? Well, no one's still alive. So who could we possibly be protecting?
Well, that's a good question, and I think the answer is clear. It's the institutions that had, a stake in the corruption, had a major role in the corruption that ended JFK's life. We know even from the documents that were released that the CIA played a major role in tracking Lee Harvey Oswald beyond what they had originally said, that information of wiretapping Oswald was withheld from the Warren Commission, that James Angleton played a much more major role in that wiretapping than we ever knew before, that James Angleton, the same CIA operative, also had a special relationship with the director to work on special projects, and he maintained the U.S. relationship with Israeli intelligence. Like, he was the biggest catalyst for that relationship. He essentially owned it on the American side. And that the CIA engaged in more, schemes to assassinate foreign leaders, Rafael Trujillo specifically in the Dominican Republic, than we knew. And if the American people knew about the corrupt institutions that govern the deep state, they would be much more apt to call for their dissolution, call for their abolishment, and that's who they're protecting. It's not necessarily a single figure. Those single figures are just figureheads in a mass machine that's a systematic issue. And the systematic corruption and the regime change and propaganda apparatus, it's institutionalized in the deep state.
By not releasing all of those files, and that's a pretty short list of suspects. So I think we kind of know what that is, at least in part. I don't know the details. I know some, but I think it's pretty obvious. Same with Epstein. It's pretty clear who some of the players were. They were governments, the U.S. government involved, British government involved, Israeli government involved at various levels. The guy lived a fairly long life. He died in his mid-60s. He was pretty active in government work, arms trading, for example, from a young age, from his late 20s, I think, when he left Bear Stearns.
This is true. He got in bed with arms traffickers like Douglas Leese and Adnan Khashoggi, who was one of his clients for a time. Adnan Khashoggi playing a major role in the Israel side of Iran-Contra, because if you remember, if you were alive at that time, the arms went from the United States to Israel as a conduit, and then from Israel to Iran. And it was that way because it was prohibited by law for the U.S. to send to Iran those arms directly. And Adnan Khashoggi, the consummate Saudi playboy, played a role in that. And Epstein linked up with those guys, probably, from what we can glean from the information that is available, because of his money laundering skills that were a part of those arms trafficking processes as well.
He got into that business with Robert Maxwell. You don't trade arms by yourself. You do it on behalf of governments and with the assistance of governments. Obviously, you've been around this, So from that age, from say 30 to 65-ish when he died, so 35 years, he's intersecting with governments. It's not just the Israelis. I mean, the Israelis were definitely involved. Ehud Barak is living at his house. Okay. And we have a lot of his emails that prove that, and I'm not defending the Israeli government, which is hard to defend, but I'm just trying to tell the truth, which is it's not just the Israelis. Okay. It's us. It's the British, the French. It's the usual players, the intel services that matter in the West, and probably others. So that's who's being protected, of course, and then all kinds of other pawns.
Yeah, I agree with this. The evidence shows that clearly. There's like a 7-part investigation by the heroic journalists at Drop Site News, Murtaza Hussein and Ryan Grimm on this. Epstein worked on behalf of the Israeli government. It's totally undeniable at this point. He arranged security agreements between Israel and the Ivory Coast, between Israel and Mongolia. You can see this from the leaked email exchanges. He set up wire transfers to one of Israel's most prominent spies. We can see in the leaked email address him confirming the bank accounts to this spy, Yoni Koren, who, by the way, also lived with them for a time. He set up a back channel between Putin and himself to figure out how they could financially prosper under the Syrian civil war that had the U.S. help depose Assad for the sake of al-Qaeda, set up back channel negotiations, brokered that organization of peoples to try to profit from this. We know that there's more, including him trying to solicit funds from the Rothschilds Bank to support Israel's cyber weapon warfare. This is all part of their stories. It's very substantiated, and yet that lead's totally buried. The corporate media isn't talking about it at all. Very few people in the independent media are talking about it, but it is corroborated.
And so I think one of the main takeaways from that story, about which I know a lot, but not everything, is that the leaders that we believe are leaders, and people are starting to get this, like our elected officials, oh, they have so much power, Senator so-and-so, President, what's his name? You know, like these are the people running our society, are not the people running our society. Of course, they themselves are subject to enormous pressures from, you know, other people and coalitions of people and forces and interests. And like, that's what they're, and the closer you get to them, the more time you spend with the people who are in charge, the more you realize they're not really in charge. One of the things we've learned is that the people who are really kind of running America's foreign policy, whether it's Lindsey Graham or whomever, these people are not geniuses at all. Like they're dumb. They're dumb. They're just mediocre.
They are. They're manipulators. That's all they do. They play a role to extract money from the U.S. populace and send it to their cronies in Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, and Israel, of course. And that's their job. They perform that job, some of them for 3 or 4 decades, like Lindsey Graham, right? Like Mitch McConnell. They've been doing this for their entire life. It's their career to do this, to redistribute funds from the working class in America to the politically connected elites, and do it while propagandizing it for different reasons, to support democracy, because it's for the children. It'll help flourish. You know, it'll help people flourish around the world. It'll safeguard American interests, but Americans are seeing through that.
Jeffrey Epstein is my favorite example. Because Jeffrey Epstein lived his life basically in the shadows, like you couldn't really know where the money, you still don't know where the money came from, or like, what's the goal of this? What is this? You can't know because it's all secret. Classified, national security, da, 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 da. You start to assume that Jeffrey Epstein is this like Svengali, and he's a genius, and he's controlling everything. And then you read his emails. He's like a fucking moron from Staten Island who can barely speak English. He's like dumb. He's totally impressed by Harvard. He went to Cooper Union. He's impressed by Harvard because the brand name impresses him. It's like wearing a polo shirt with a horse on it. He thinks that's cool. He's totally unsophisticated, actually.
Well, I'll somewhat disagree with this. So I've spent over 20 hours analyzing individual Epstein emails from these recent leaks, not only Ehud Barak's emails that got leaked and had a lot of Epstein's in there, but the ones from the House Oversight Committee. And I agree with Tucker. There is unsophistication in terms of his writing. He was a horrible writer, spelled everything wrong, terrible at sometimes in kind of conveying his thoughts. But also a lot of the evidence behind the emails, like we knew about even before this, shows that he was sophisticated in money laundering, and that's how he made his career at Bear Stearns. And, you know, his mission at first was to be an options trader on the options desk, not an actual trader, but sitting alongside one. Didn't succeed in that, so he was moved into a different unit that worked on, you know, working with clients to launder money to other places to save them in terms of taxes. trying to do that legally, but in the process, he learned a lot about that. And as Whitney Webb puts in One Nation Under Blackmail, he wasn't just an idiot stooge in this regard. He actually did succeed in that. And that's why figures from the deep underbelly of the intelligence community did want to reach out to him. That's why he was on a jet with Douglas Leese to the Pentagon just after he left Bear Stearns. So partially agree, partially disagree.
And not smart at all. He's crafty. He's got high canine and animal intelligence, but he's not a genius at all. He's a dummy. He's a thug. And that has been like kind of amazing to see. His only real advantage is that he's evil. He'll do anything. He's got just no limits at all. Like, you need to kill someone? We'll do that. If we have to, we'll do that. And that person, the unscrupulous person, does have an advantage because there are no boundaries, right? So if your goal is to get rich or powerful, you can get there faster if you'll do anything to get there. Doesn't end well, ever. Didn't end well with him. But that's really what I learned, is that the people who are mad at me call me names because that's literally all they can do. Shut up! You can't speak at that event. We don't want you on stage. We're deplatforming you. Okay, I don't care really, but like,
Who's saying that to you?
Oh, yeah, what
do
I don't even want to go through. I don't want to make it about me, because I'm certainly not oppressed, and you haven't impressed my spirit. You could fucking shoot me, and you're not going to impress my spirit.
Well, I hope that's true. I'm glad Tucker's told the truth about this, and he's told it for months and months, including at that Turning Point USA event, where he stood up there and said, Epstein was likely working for Israel. Before we had complete undeniable proof in the terms of these emails, he was saying that, and that had attracted the mass anger of Zionist donors to Turning Point USA. So I'm really glad they won't destroy his spirits. I'm also with him in that statement at the end there where, Epstein did have a lack of moral boundaries. And when it comes to people that have a lack of moral boundaries, they aren't bound by the same constraints you and I would be. He was willing to do whatever it took to, get off on this sick and twisted, compelling force in his own mind, and just completely disregard the rights and innocence of other human beings to do that by the dozens. Even in his first trial, not a first trial, his first case in Florida, there was over 40 witnesses stacked against him. And then he got that sweetheart deal, which, by the way, the DOJ then actually apologized for later. And Acosta said, well, I was told he was intelligence and to lay off him. We know that. That's part of the documented record. Acosta said he doesn't. Now he says he never said that, but we know from the Trump transition meeting minutes that he did say that, because the Trump transition team later then made him the Secretary of Labor. It's just so absurd. I do disagree to some extent with Tucker as far as the sophistication of Epstein, at least in the realm of money laundering. He was proficient. We have a lot of evidence of that. But in terms of how he talked about other issues, certainly he was unsophisticated in those emails. He couldn't even spell or write properly. And some of his comments just... What jumps out the page on some of those comments is just such bitterness toward every other person around him, except if they were like the New York Times journalists that were corresponding with him, and including Landon Thomas and Michael Wolff, who he talked about, hey, how can we get blackmail on Trump? He hated Trump in the end. Absolutely. But he was corresponding with Bannon. Bannon was one of his closest compatriots all the way up until the end. Another angle to this story that's being completely buried. So yeah, Epstein was involved with Israel. It is a slam door case. You can read all about that on Drop Site News, that series that Murtaza Hussein and Ryan Grimm have. Like I said, if there was a world where true journalism reigned, that would be the leading story. Wall-to-wall coverage over Epstein's ironclad and undeniable associations to Israel that most Americans have no idea about. They haven't followed this. And I don't think we're going to get true disclosures out of these Epstein releases. I wish we were. Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ro Khanna fought like hell for it. Marjorie Taylor Greene was called Marjorie Trader Greene for it, of course, and then resigned. I hated to see that, especially the kind of pressure that was put toward her that she was going to then resign. It almost like shows that this is just going to happen to other people that try to buck the system and actually try to unveil transparency in these issues at great risk to themselves, even when they stand alone against not a popular president right now amongst the American populace, but a popular president right now among the Republicans in Congress, her biggest political triumph. Massey's the only one that suffered these slings and arrows for so many years without apparently letting it get to him. And that's not to put Marjorie Taylor Greene down, because I would not want to put up with these slings and arrows. But I don't think we're going to see transparency in this case, unfortunately. But let's be real, we already know a lot of the connections. And they're the connections that the state most doesn't want us to know. And they're buried as the lead to the story, which it should be. But what do you guys think? Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? Let me know in the comments down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also, if you like this video, please consider joining as a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button down below. And if you do that, you can gain access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube, and I'll really appreciate your support. You'll be able to see those members only videos right away. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. It'll shoot you to a site. You just plug in your email. I'll send you a copy in PDF form of that book, free of charge, no obligation, just because I appreciate you viewing the channel. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.
So here's the point. It's not actually about Israel. It's about the components of the American right.
Right.
Who are defending mass murder in Gaza.
Your premise is that they're doing mass murder of people in Gaza. I think that there are conservatives who would just reject that premise and say that's not actually happening.
Okay, if you can't say that, then you are endorsing collective punishment, aren't you?
Tucker Carlson just slammed Matt Walsh's fence sitting on the issue of Israel's genocide in Gaza, calling it an embrace of collective punishment. And in this clip, they get into something of a fiery exchange on this topic, with Matt Walsh classically saying he doesn't care, but Tucker making him face the reality of the situation, that not caring is actually taking a side in this whole thing. So let's watch. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
As I heard you explain who you're fighting against and why, and I nodded along in agreement, I really was the choir to your sermon, I thought you're describing the people who defend the war in Gaza perfectly. They don't believe in absolute standards of truth at all. What they're committing in Gaza is exactly what they decry correctly when it happens to other people. You can't kill innocents. They didn't do anything wrong. Not on purpose, you can't. Period. You're not allowed to do that, but they defend it fully. So they don't believe in an absolute standard of behavior at all. They don't believe in truth. It's dependent upon circumstance. Like, in fact, you've even seen people say it out loud. You know, we raised an entire generation correctly to believe that slaughtering people because of how they were born is the greatest sin, which it is. I believe that. And now we're being, hoisted by our own standards. And my view is, no, standards are absolute. It's either true or it's not. And it's universally applicable, or it's not a real thing. It's just it's identity politics. That's exactly what I hate. And identity politics is the kind of political expression of the worldview that you have just decried and declared war against. And God bless you for doing that. But that is in full flower on the right. And I don't want to dignify people by naming them, but people I know who call themselves like MAGA conservatives are defending the murder of innocents. And by the way, some of them suggest, well, we just move the refugees into the United States because that's good for the country that they support. But is that good for us? That's an attack on American identity.
Yeah, Tucker's exactly right here. A lot of people do defend it, even while saying, hey, no one defends this killing in Gaza. No one defends the killing of innocents, but they make every excuse in the book, not only for it, but also to continue bankrolling Israel after the fact, after this has been exposed, after 100,000 civilians have been killed there. That is what we are getting here. And they'll make every excuse in the book, like I said. They'll say, hey, this is all Hamas is doing, or they use human shields, as if that's a justification, when the human shield justification doesn't get you out of a premeditated murder charge in the United States. We would never allow that to fly in the United States. If two evildoers take, 10 hostages into a school, you don't just drop a bomb. You couldn't justify that by blaming them. And that's what a large portion of the American Zionist right does. And it needs to be exposed. It needs to be put out in the open that we just can't keep defending this. There's no sense in it. And those people that continue to do this and make excuses need to be raked over the coals for it.
You're also describing, by the way, in a lot of ways, Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela, who we're all required to hate. And I'm not supporting him, of course. But this is like the most socially conservative country in Latin America that has banned abortion, banned gay marriage, banned gender transitions, banned usury, banned, loaning at crazy interest levels because it destroys people. I don't think he's done a good job running his country. Obviously, he hasn't. But to your point that, we should be open to talking to people who share our most basic values, how is he not on that list? Oh, shut up, you communist. But I'm not a communist. I'm not going to be bullied by your dumb labels.
Yeah, well, the answer to the Maduro question is that the neocons still want to overthrow that regime, just as they did in Bush's. They kind of go together in some regard, but Trump's first term, where he tried to replace Maduro with Juan Guaido, giving him $53 million. This was widely reported at the time, and denouncing Maduro as, some crook that stole an election, right? He stole an election. We're going to overthrow him, and making up all this absurd propaganda as they are now about narco-terrorism when no fentanyl comes in from Venezuela, minuscule amounts of cocaine do. It's just a neocon empire-building project, but in South America rather than the Middle East this time. Not yours, but I'm anticipating the many attacks. I have been attacked for saying that, but it's true. So what's the answer? Do you see what I'm saying? So I guess what's blowing my mind is that I thought I was speaking the same language as a lot of people that I disagreed with on the margins, like about, what's the best way to harness capitalism to help people? I mean, these are real debates. And then I realized with the war in Gaza that these are people who don't believe in Western civilization, because Western civilization can be boiled down to one concept, and that's the individual. If someone does something wrong, we punish that person. We don't kill his kids. Why do we do that? Why is that our standard? Because we believe that God created every person as an individual, and every person will stand before God alone to account for his life. He's not responsible for what his children do, what his ancestors did, what his forebears might do. He's responsible for himself because we believe in the individual soul, not the collective soul. And that's what makes our civilization unique in the history of the world. And it derives from Christianity, from the Christian belief of the individual soul. And I see all these people who clearly don't believe that. So how are we on the same side? Yeah, that's an interesting question, especially because a lot of these people on the right, people like Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh and some others, made their careers, just exposing identity politics on the left, on the liberal establishment side, just excoriating some of these people in public debates about carrying on this idea that, there's this white guilt, there's this intrinsic, guilt in our society in America because of what our ancestors did. Well, that's the kind of collective judgment that many of the neocons and Zionists use about Palestinians, that they're subhuman, they're subpar. You can see it reek out of the propaganda apparatus of Israel with Smotrich saying, these people are filth and we should starve them. Literally, Smotrich did that. And that's what they eventually did. So, that's what we're getting here. And the right is frankly very hypocritical if you're not going to say that's an embrace of identity politics. But, the liberal establishment type is the one to demonize. But that's it.
Well, so this is where we can be friends on the same side and disagree, because, I wouldn't agree with everything you've just laid out there. I think now, last time we talked a little bit about Israel, and my take at the time was I really don't care. Right. I just don't care. I honestly don't care.
I want that take bad. Yeah. I don't want to care. I don't want anything to do with this.
That's still my take. That's always been my take. It upsets people on both. This is one legitimately on both sides of the Israel issue. People get mad at me for that because they say that, well, if they're very pro-Israel, they say, well, you're being a coward and you need to stand up and support Israel and talk about how Israel's our greatest, most important ally and all this stuff. But then on the other side, very much it's, well, no, Israel's the great Satan. They're the most evil country in the world.
Right.
They're responsible for everything bad that happens. And which is something that I think some people legitimately really do believe at some level.
A lot of people believe that.
Right. And so then they say to me, well, you need to stand up and say, and say that. And again, my response to that is, first of all, don't tell me what to say. Okay. I have my own mind.
Amen.
So don't tell me what to say. I will say what I want to say. And I can only speak from my own opinion. This is my view. And I think, and we'll get back to it, but not to get sidetracked. This is one thing, by the way, that's making political conversation in this country impossible, is that all anyone ever does anymore is impugn the motives behind the argument that you're making. So you make an argument, and then everyone goes, well, you're only saying that because, and it's like,
yeah, they say that because you work for a guy that gives you a paycheck that is the most rigid zealot of the Zionist cause in America. That's what they say. But yeah, I guess I'm with Walsh when he says, no one can make him do anything. He has his own mind. But when he exudes a viewpoint that is straddling the fence on this issue, and people dying when it's being bankrolled by the United States, that should be refuted. That should be rejected wholesale, because of how odious it is, and it just creeps into every other aspect of our foreign policy, it seems. In Venezuela, which they just mentioned, for instance, they want to insert Machado, the Nobel Prize winner, as the substitute for Maduro. Why? Because Machado is good friends with Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likudniks in Israel. She's tweeted about it. She said that the cause of Israel is the cause of Venezuela, and it's well established and documented her close ties. It's Jonathan Pollard, a convicted Israeli spy, giving U.S. secrets to the Israelis at the height of the Cold War, meeting with Mike Huckabee, and then the administration coming out and saying, we stand with our ambassador in that. Just absurd. The amount of dedication to this cause is just driving a wedge between Americans, and some Americans are waking up. And Matt Walsh, you don't have to denounce your friends that are Zionists or continue to be so. You can take a stance on this without having to denounce them. And in other interviews, I've seen him conflate that. You don't necessarily have to rake Ben Shapiro over the coals. I would love to see you do that. But you can say, no, genocide is wrong no matter who does it. And I don't care who's offended by that. That's what you could say if you were a man of, actual character.
First of all, even if it's true that I'm making this argument for some dishonest reason, well, is the argument right or not? Because if the argument is right, the argument's still right, even if I'm the worst guy in the world saying
But it's also like arguing with a woman. They tell you what you think, and it's like, no, I'm actually telling you what I think.
And why? And the
what?
Right. And well, here's why you're really saying that. Well, for me, the only person who can speak to your motives is you.
Exactly.
And so if I ask you, well, why are you saying that? And you tell me, I have no choice but to just accept that, because I'm not in your mind. You're the only authority. You are the only authority of what is in your mind. You're the only one on the planet. The only other authority, the only greater authority is God, and I can't really ask him. So I can only go to you on that. And so
you're describing my life, but yes, right. I agree with you.
So for me on Israel, when I say I don't care, and everyone on both sides goes, well, you're saying that because... No, I'm saying that because that's what I think. Yeah. I'm saying, and I always have, which is why, by the way, you can go through my catalog. I've been blabbering my opinions publicly for a while now, and not as I haven't been in the business as long as you, but I've been at least 10 years on the record. And if you go through that, before I worked at the Daily Wire, and while I was there, when I was independent, I was an independent blogger, just like churning out content, and and you can go through all that, and here's what you'll find. You'll find that I almost never ever talked about Israel, and when I did talk about it, on the rare, like once every 5 years, if it came up, my take was, I don't really care about this. I don't care about this country. It's not my country. If you're in America, if you're an American politician, you should care about America first. And that's it. That's always been my take. So that's always been my take.
By the way, me too, believe it or not, up until the last year, I don't, in 35 years, I don't think I've talked about Israel 10 times.
Well, that's the thing. Like, how can you really say that I don't care? Like, it'd be like saying the slaughter of mass people, you just don't care about that. It renders you soulless to some extent. Now, whether you should support it with financial aid, that's another question. And, to Walsh's credit, I've seen him say, I don't believe in foreign aid to any country. And someone asked him, including Israel, and he said, Yeah, I didn't make any qualifiers there. But at the same time, saying you don't care when you profess to be a pro-lifer. I mean, this is something that drives a lot of, pro-choicers crazy, I would say, and pushes them into that corner when you're going to say, life is precious. We need to preserve the life of a baby. But you just don't care about mass slaughter in Gaza because it's Israel. It's our greatest ally in the Middle East. It just exposes the hypocrisy behind that. And to be clear, I'm very pro-life. I believe in that. But I believe it's rank hypocrisy when then you say, I don't care about the mass application of the thing you say that you're against. It's, just exposing Matt Walsh to say that.
So here's the point. It's not actually about Israel. It's about the components of the American right.
Right.
Who are defending mass murder, and I mean that murder, killing people who didn't do anything wrong, in Gaza. Well, that's it. It's not Israel. It's what about the parts of this coalition that, as you noted, Charlie really did keep together, that are now fracturing. But one of the reasons they're fracturing is because they have different views, different worldviews, and that is obvious when you hear how they respond to the murder of kids and women in Gaza. So it's Americans responding to that. Are you really conservative? How are you not the leftist that you just described if you're well, they're basically all Hamas, including the kids? That is collective punishment. That's
exactly right. And that is what these prominent commentators on the right have just completely built their careers on when focusing their ire toward the liberal establishment for doing it. Tucker's exactly right. It's the application of collective punishment that used to be bad. It used to be something that we denounced, but in application from America's greatest ally against Gazans on the bankroll of the U.S., giving deference to that country over our own and over our sovereignty, we're just supposed to buy into it then. I say no. I say that's absurd.
That's blood guilt. That's the opposite of what you described. How can I be on the same side as someone with that attitude?
Well, here's what I would say. I think that if somebody is making the argument that we or Israel can kill as many Palestinians as they want, can kill children because their lives have no value, because they're Palestinian. If you're making that argument, then that is a leftist argument.
Exactly. It's a leftist argument.
It is. And that's why just saying I don't care is partiality toward that, because that's the status quo. It's the mass murder of Palestinians, as many as Netanyahu and his regime wants, on the American bankroll, giving them $25 billion alone since October 7th, about $350 billion in total since the inception of Israel. So if you're saying, that's wrong, that's not a correct argument, that's a leftist argument in his mind, when most leftists would completely reject the premise. Real leftists that are dissident anti-war leftists would reject the premise that anything having to do with U.S. ties toward Israel is good. They would not accept that. But then to fence it and just say, I don't care. Well, you're really contradicting yourself there by saying that's wrong, but I don't care. Given that, again, is the status quo of what we're used to in U.S. foreign policy regime.
However, I think that there are plenty of people who would defend and have defended Israel's actions in Gaza, and even our involvement, which I don't agree with us being involved at all, but people have had that view. But not on that basis. What they would say is, they would say, oh, well, it's not true that they're killing children. It's not, or it's really tragic, but it's there's no other way to fight the war. It's not intentional. We're actually targeting the terrorists, and these are casualties that happen like in any war. It's very bad. You try to minimize them, but we don't want that to happen. They could say, there's many arguments along those lines. Just also arguments that just kind of reject the premise. Like your premise is that they're doing mass murder of people in Gaza. I think that there are conservatives who would just reject that premise and say that's not actually happening.
Okay, but if you I think the undisputed fact there are tens of thousands, 70,000, we can certainly say tens of thousands of women and children killed in Gaza. And so there are really two arguments you can make. One is that that happens in war, collateral damage, which is true. It's 100% true that always happens in war. It hasn't happened at this scale in 80 years, but in the West, but it does happen. And the United States has done a lot of it. We dropped the atom bombs. Okay. So
Absolutely. The U.S. has no room to take the moral high ground on this because it's a mass murder machine. Our government, our criminal government, that I don't want to be complicit with at all. And the only patriotic thing is to expose that and show why regular people should be against it. And everything that comes with it, the entangling alliances, the debt, the inflation that comes with it. But Matt, I got to tell you, man, people, yes, will justify these murders and say they're all Hamas and they're not murdering those people. But Israel's own data refutes that. That leaked database that came out a few months ago, Glenn Greenwald did a story on it. The Guardian did a story about it, where a leaked database showed that 83% of the people killed in Gaza were civilians. They were not Hamas. And this is Israeli data that was created by comparing names in a database of Hamas individuals and Islamic Jihad individuals to the actual people killed. Israel's own data shows an 83% civilian casualty rate.
like, Israel's not the only country that's done this. But are you sad about it? Do you think it's bad? Would you be willing to say, holy shit, I can't believe we killed 70,000 non-combatants? That's the acid test. Can you admit that that's horrible? It's horrible. It's a moral crime. It was a moral crime when we dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. And it's not even a close call in my view. It's not an endorsement of the Imperial Japanese government, but it's like, that's just bad. If you can't say that, then you are endorsing collective punishment, aren't you?
Yeah, I would say you are entirely. Like, you're getting away from the cornerstone of Western civilization as Tucker Carlson sees it anyways, and I happen to agree. The idea of individual identity, of individual rights, of self-ownership, where we obtain our rights from our creator. And if you're not religious, you just believe that it's an extension of your own humanity, but that is the cornerstone of the West. This idea that there are some inviolable aspects of humanity that just can't be circumscribed or limited or inhibited by a central state. And when you're denying that agency to others by excusing mass murder and just saying, I don't care, and that being your position, you know, I'm not really that surprised that you get attacked from both sides on that, because this is a pressing issue. The Israel first mentality is completely pervasive in our government, from the presidential administration to Congress to the bureaucracy. It seeps into our culture. You can see how it seeps into the Epstein scandal and, you know, the Charlie Kirk assassination. All this plays into a pivotal time in history where I don't think you can really sit this one out, Matt Walsh. I don't think you can sit out, you know, what your opinion is toward Israel. I think you either have to come down on one side or the other. You're not forced to. You can continue straddling the fence. Your free speech demands that you can continue doing that, but it only invites the suggestions that you're not ready for this moment, that you're not as courageous as many, you know, right-wingers want to believe that you are, and that you built your career, you know, doing. So that's what you're getting here. This is a Daily Wire employee that works under the thumb of Shapiro. So to what extent this represents his true beliefs or not, I guess that's anyone's question. There has been rifts between the Daily Wire and Brett Cooper, the Daily Wire and Candace Owens, for obvious reasons. Maybe Matt could be the next. I just wonder if that happens, if Matt will reveal a stronger opinion on this side. But, you know, he makes lucrative ventures happen with Ben Shapiro and his company maintaining this fence-sitting line that, you know, it has to discourage Ben Shapiro, for instance, to even have him on this show. By the way, talking to Tucker Carlson, when I interviewed Dave Smith the other night, he talked about the fact that, you know, at one point Ben Shapiro went on Megyn Kelly and was trying to just destroy people who dared to talk to Tucker Carlson. He wanted this cancellation crusade to be transferred through conversations, and that for it to be an inception where if you talk to Tucker, then you're wrong. And if you talk to the guy that talked to Tucker, then you're wrong. Well, your biggest guy, Ben Shapiro, is talking to Tucker. Are you going to come out and smear him as an anti-Semite now? Are you going to say that he's wrong-headed for having that conversation with Tucker? I don't think that's going to happen. I think that he could make some exceptions for the guy that's making all the money for the Daily Wire, but that's what we see here. But what do you guys think? Is Tucker Carlson right? Is Matt Walsh just not ready for this moment? A coward of sorts morally for refusing to actually take a position against mass murder and saying Israel is guilty of that in this situation. Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Tucker Carlson. Great segment. I'm glad this subject came up. I really appreciate it. And if you liked this video, please consider joining as a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button down below. And if you do that, you can gain access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below, and that'll send you off to a website. You just plug in your email address, and I'll send that to you free of charge just because you watch my content. I appreciate you. Until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.